My name is Christian Viveros-Fauné. I'm an art critic and a curator. Live in New York City, in Brooklyn, as a matter of fact. You know, my background is pretty, how should I put it, cartonless, titleless. I have a BA in English from Rutgers University. I asked backwards did into what I do, essentially by being interested in two things: one, writing, and two, art. And one folded into the other in a fairly natural way. And it turned out that on top of my interest in both of those things, I was pretty good at one, writing, and two, having accessible observations about what artists do and don't do, as a matter of fact. So, you know, one thing that led to another, and I started writing regularly for publications in New York and elsewhere. And at some point I even had an art gallery. I've worn a lot of hats in the art world. I've sort of been in and out of the art scene for some almost 25 years. I think that's about right. I've worked with a couple of artists who work specifically with science, and they've collaborated with scientists, right? One of them is an artist named Kaisa Johnson, who's now in Los Angeles. But when I had a gallery, I worked with her, and I've written about her quite a bit. And she makes, when I worked with her, she made work that was made up of tiny little units of registered units that you could identify if you were looking through a nuclear microscope. They were subatomic decay particles. And she would marshal these units the way, say, an abstract painter would, and make what it sometimes looked like abstractions, and then other times would look essentially like figures. She might make the Virgin Mary in subatomic decay particles, or shifting a bit, move away from subatomic decay particles and identify the constituent particles of, say, the plague, and use that to, again, make a religious symbol or figure. I remember, curiously, that she wound up working quite a bit with the National Institute of Health. Actually, that's not too curious, but the connection to for her to the National Institute of Health, to the scientists there, was a guy named Richard Massey. I know he won't mind my mentioning his name. He was one of the inventors of Cipro. And he also, interestingly enough, became, after making some significant fortune on that particular discovery, a major collector. So we were in touch with him, and he was clearly really sort of enamored of Kaisa's work, and helped her make the connections to scientists so that she could, you know, further research her work. The other sort of natural point of interest for me with science is my father, who's started out as a medical doctor and then went on to be a biochemist and essentially retired as a neuroscientist. And aside from the fact that he is now a docent at a museum in San Diego, he always used to sort of say to me that, trying to impress on me the idea that doing pure research for him was something that he thought was very much analogous to the kind of research an artist does in his or her studio. It probably took me a few years to actually sort of get my head around what he was talking about, but I clearly see the connections. So yeah, he was absolutely right. I think all kinds of collaborations are important. The thing about interdisciplinary collaborations is that they have a potential to basically break up paradigms, right? And I think that's that potentiality is something that makes the, unfortunately, few, in terms of the larger number, experiments in genuine interdisciplinary collaboration so valuable. I think really one of the fundamental ways to get out of the basic rut of thinking that the way we usually do, to get out of practice methods of applying knowledge or applying knowledge to certain problems, is by trying to upset the notions of what those problems are often, or by reanalyzing them, or to rethink the postulates that are basic sort of building blocks of knowledge, are based on. One of the easiest ways to do that, I think, is to try and see your particular issue or bag of knowledge through another discipline, through another set of eyes. I do think that thinking about art, for example, through science or through politics, amplifies the role of all three. And I think it makes potential radical observations about each of those practices. And I think that's obviously something that one wants to do with greater frequency than presently occurs.